in red. 18 missiles, all incoming, all Russian. Inside the base, soldiers wake to the sound of warning sirens. Doors slam, boots hit the floor. Someone shouts, "This is not a drill." But Russia has no idea what comes next. No idea that before sunrise, 3 of its major cities will lose power in a way no missile can stop. Stay with this story, because at 2:20 a.m., the United States activates something Russia never expected. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Helps us bring you more real-time global conflict breakdowns. Tensions between Russia and the United States had been simmering for months. Across Eastern Europe, NATO forces were increasing patrols. Forward bases grew larger, and new radar stations appeared near strategic locations. The Arctic, once quiet, became a hotspot. Both sides tested missile systems, electronic warfare, and long-range drones. The U.S. expanded its missile defense network, including Patriot batteries, THAAD launchers, and early warning radars. Every move was tracked. Every drill was monitored. Intelligence analysts warned that any misstep could escalate quickly. Russia's economy was under strain. The Kremlin faced pressure to show strength, both to its people and to the military. Energy prices fluctuated. Public dissatisfaction grew. Military leaders urged decisive action. Cyber attacks on infrastructure and low-level airspace incursions had already increased. Moscow believed the U.S. was trying to undermine its deterrence and test its resolve. To the generals, a bold strike against a U.S. base would send a clear message. Russia could act and defend its interests at any time. The final spark came from an unexpected source. A U.S. reconnaissance drone flew near Crimea, close enough to Russian radar to trigger alarms. The Kremlin viewed it as an intentional provocation. Within hours, discussions inside the Russian high command turned heated. Some wanted a warning strike. Others pushed for a more direct approach. After careful deliberation, the Kremlin approved a limited strike. 18 precision missiles, aimed at a U.S. base in Europe, was meant as a show of force, not a declaration of war. The chosen base was critical. Stationed there were several thousand troops, advanced radar installations, and a squadron of F-16 fighters. It acted as a hub for NATO operations, intelligence gathering, and quick response missions. Its location allowed the U.S. to monitor Russian missile movements and provide early warning to allied nations. Losing or damaging this base, Russian strategists believed, create a window of advantage and send a clear political message to Washington. As night fell, Russian missile units moved into position. Submarines adjusted their patrol routes. Mobile launchers rolled quietly into camouflaged locations. Bombers took off from distant airfields, their engines humming in the darkness. Troops followed strict radio silence. In Moscow, top generals monitored every movement on encrypted feeds. A sense of grim anticipation filled the war rooms. Meanwhile, the U.S. base operated under routine conditions. Soldiers prepared for midnight drills. Maintenance crews checked equipment, and radar operators monitored usual traffic. Few expected anything out of the ordinary. There had been alerts before, false alarms, and minor incursions. But nothing prepared them for 2:14 a.m. Back in Russia, the final briefing was short. Commanders reviewed coordinates, flight paths, and target priorities. "Accuracy is essential," said one general. The strike had to be precise. Collateral damage within NATO territory had to be minimized. The missiles were armed, prepped, and waiting for the signal. From Moscow to the launch points, tension was thick. Soldiers and officers alike knew the stakes. A successful strike would elevate Russia's standing. A failure could spark an international crisis. Unknown to the Russians, the U.S. had also been preparing. Months prior, Cyber Command had identified vulnerabilities in Russian grid and communication networks. Backups were in place. Contingency plans were ready. Air defenses were fully operational. Radar operators had conducted drills simulating incoming cruise and ballistic missiles. Although the soldiers were unaware, the Pentagon had a counter already lined up, a response designed not to destroy, but to disable critical systems quietly. As the clock ticked past to 10 a.m., both sides waited. In Europe, the U.S. base was quiet. Lights flickered. The northern winds cut across the radar arrays. In Russia, crews ran final system checks. Hands hovered over launch consoles, eyes scanned monitors. Every second counted. The calm of the night was deceptive. Soon, alarms would pierce silence. The first missiles would be in the air. The world would witness a confrontation. Few expected a confrontation that would change the battlefield forever. By 2:14 a.m., all preparations were complete. The Russian missiles left their silos, submarines, and bombers. On the other side, the U.S. base's early warning system began to detect them. It was a moment of extreme danger. Every protocol was activated, shelters opened, interceptor batteries powered up, commanders took their positions. The quiet of the Arctic night vanished, and in less than 5 minutes, the first wave of the attack would reach its target. The setup was complete. Two powers poised for action, one strike about to unfold, and one response ready that would shock the world. 2:14 a.m., the first radar blips appear. At the U.S. base, operators freeze. The screen lights up with multiple high-speed targets approaching from the north. At first, they suspect a system glitch. Then the computer confirms it. 18 inbound missiles. The alarm sounds. Red lights flash. Sirens pierce the cold night air. The base goes from calm to chaos in seconds. Soldiers sprint to hardened bunkers. Crew members grab radios, check weapons, and confirm defensive positions. Commanders shout orders. Every second counts. Outside, radar operators track the missile's speed, altitude, and trajectory. Some move like cruise missiles, low and fast. Others follow ballistic arcs, higher and unpredictable. The threat is real. The base is under attack. The first wave of missiles enters detection range. Air defenses engage immediately. Patriot PAC-3 batteries swivel toward targets, firing interceptor missiles. That units track high-altitude threats, calculating intercept points. Short-range defense systems activate automatically, ready to destroy any missile that penetrates the outer layer. The sky above the base explodes with flashes as interceptors collide with incoming missiles. Smoke trails streak across the dark horizon. Despite the defenses, a few missiles break through. One hits a fuel depot, sending a massive fireball into the night. Another strikes a barracks, causing structural damage. Alarms inside the base intensify. Soldiers take cover. Fire teams battle flames. Medical units prepare for casualties. Miraculously, due to early warnings and rapid sheltering, fatalities are minimal. The base sustains damage but remains operational. US fighters scramble. F-16s launch from the runway, climbing to intercept. Radar locks onto the remaining missiles. Pilots maneuver aggressively, firing countermeasures, flares, and electronic jamming systems. Some missiles divert mid-flight due to these countermeasures, detonating harmlessly over uninhabited terrain. The operation demonstrates the effectiveness of the layered defense network. The U.S. forces remain calm, disciplined, and precise. Inside the Pentagon, decision-makers monitor every feed. The encrypted lines from the base show damage reports in real time. Commanders debate response options. Diplomatic channels are ready, but the U.S. decides on a measured retaliation. Not with conventional explosives, but with a high-tech silent strike aimed at disabling critical systems inside Russia. The goal is to send a warning. Attacks on U.S. personnel or installations will have immediate consequences. Meanwhile, Russian commanders celebrate prematurely. From Moscow, they monitor the missile flight paths, confident their targets are hit. They assume the strike will weaken NATO presence and show Russian strength. But the celebration is short-lived. Unknown to them, U.S. Cyber Command has already initiated a counterstrike. Small signals move through the Russian electrical grid, silently activating automated shutdowns and key control nodes. At 2:20 a.m., the first signs appear. Power flickers in 3 major Russian cities. Substations trip, communications begin to fail. Traffic lights go dark. Hospitals switch to emergency generators. The population, unaware of the missile strike's failure, panics. Russian military units scramble to assess damage, but automated systems block remote interventions. The precision of the U.S. counterstrike leaves Russian commanders stunned. Back at the U.S. base, the initial missile attack ends. Interceptor batteries cool down.
Soldiers emerge from shelters.
Firefighting crews extinguish remaining flames. Engineers assess radar and communication systems. Casualties are treated quickly. Damage is documented. Within an hour, the base is largely operational again. The attack lasts less than 10 minutes, yet its psychological impact is immense. Russia expected success. Instead, the U.S. demonstrates overwhelming defensive and offensive capabilities without a single conventional bomb crossing Russian soil. The incident redefines the confrontation. One side uses technology, speed, and precision. The other is left scrambling in darkness. By 3 a.m., the situation stabilizes. The U.S. base has weathered the attack. The missiles that penetrated were contained, and damage was limited. Across Russia, confusion reigns. Power outages disrupt communications and logistics. Moscow realizes its miscalculation. What was intended as a show of strength has exposed vulnerabilities. The incident ends, but the lesson is clear. Modern warfare is no longer only about missiles and bombs. Speed, precision, cyber operations, and electronic warfare define the battlefield. On this night, the U.S. has proven it can respond faster and more effectively than anyone imagined. The weapons Russia deployed were a mix of advanced cruise missiles and quasi-ballistic systems. Among them were Kalibro cruise missiles, capable of flying low and following terrain to avoid radar detection. They travel at high subsonic speeds and rely on GPS and inertial guidance for precision. Russia also used Iskander missiles, short-range ballistic weapons with unpredictable flight paths designed to evade missile defenses. Air-launched KH-series missiles supplemented the strike, providing additional speed and maneuverability. Together, these 18 missiles represented a concentrated effort to overwhelm the U.S. base's defenses. The U.S., however, had prepared layers of defense. The first line consisted of an NTPY-2 radars, which provided early detection of incoming ballistic and cruise missiles. These radars tracked trajectory, speed, and elevation, relaying data to missile defense command centers in real time. Once a threat is confirmed, Patriot PAC-3 batteries engage the lower and medium-altitude missiles, targeting the warhead before it can reach the base. For high-altitude targets, that terminal high-altitude area defense interceptors move into position. Designed to destroy missiles in the exo-atmosphere, above the Earth's atmosphere, short-range defenses included automated counter-rocket, artillery, and mortar CRAM systems. These small, fast-firing defenses handle any missile or projectile that slips past the outer layers. Electronic warfare tools added another layer of protection, jamming guidance systems, and misleading warheads mid-flight. This multi-layered approach explains why 15 of the 18 Russian missiles were intercepted successfully. The U.S. base's preparedness minimized damage and kept casualties low. The 3 missiles that penetrated defenses caused localized destruction of fuel depot, a barracks, and a radar array suffered damage. Yet even these hits were contained, thanks to hardened structures and rapid response teams. Casualties were minimal, and critical systems remained operational. This outcome demonstrated the strength of integrated defense networks and the value of preparedness in modern warfare. The U.S. response was equally sophisticated. Rather than striking with traditional weapons, the Pentagon activated a cyber-electronic counterattack. For months, Cyber Command had quietly infiltrated key Russian grid systems, identifying vulnerabilities in high-voltage substations, control nodes, and automated switchgear. These systems govern the flow of electricity to millions of civilians, industrial centers, and military facilities. By carefully manipulating these nodes, the U.S. could trigger cascading outages without dropping a single bomb. At 2:20 a.m., just minutes after the missile strike, the cyber-electronic attack began. Relays in 3 Russian cities automatically tripped. Substations shut down, power lines went dark, traffic systems failed. Hospitals and emergency services switched to backup generators, but only for essential functions. The public, unaware of the attack's origin, panicked as sudden darkness spread across entire urban areas. This counterattack relied on precise timing. The U.S. needed to ensure that missiles had completed their path before activating the grid disruption, preventing any accidental interference with its own defensive systems. The result was a silent but devastating retaliation. While no physical damage was inflicted on Russia's military infrastructure, the psychological impact was profound. Citizens experienced the sudden loss of normal life, transportation, and communications. Russian commanders realized the U.S. had delivered a punishment far beyond the original missile strike. The technical lesson is clear. Modern warfare integrates traditional kinetic strikes with cyber and electronic warfare. Missiles can destroy structures and personnel, A well-timed digital or electromagnetic strike can cripple an adversary silently. Russia had relied on the assumption that a missile attack would be decisive. Instead, it revealed the fragility of even well-defended civilian and military infrastructure under advanced cyber-electronic operations. In total, this confrontation lasted less than 10 minutes in the physical world, yet its strategic implications stretched far beyond. The combination of missile defense, electronic countermeasures, and cyber retaliation demonstrated the complexity of modern conflict. Both kinetic and digital battlefields now operate together, forcing military planners to account for threats beyond traditional bombs and bullets. By the end of the incident, the U.S. had successfully defended its base while demonstrating the reach of its technological dominance. The message was unmistakable. Any future attack would meet both immediate physical resistance and precise, silent retaliation. Russia, meanwhile, faced an uncomfortable truth. Its offensive strike had failed, and it had exposed vulnerabilities in its own power grid and command systems, making the next confrontation far riskier. By 3 a.m., the immediate threat had passed. The U.S. base was largely intact. Though engineers worked quickly to repair minor structural damage and restore full operational capacity, firefighting crews finished extinguishing blazes at the fuel depot. Medical teams treated a few minor injuries. The base had survived the attack with minimal disruption, proving the effectiveness of both physical defenses and preparedness protocols. Soldiers and officers reflected quietly on the intensity of those 10 minutes, understanding how close they came to significant loss. Across Russia, the situation was dramatically different. Within minutes of the missile strike, the cyber-electronic counterattack unfolded. 3 major cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Novosibirsk, experienced total power outages. High-voltage substations automatically shut down, communications networks failed, and transportation systems froze. Hospitals switched to emergency generators, but only essential services remained operational. Citizens awoke to sudden darkness, widespread panic, and confusion. Traffic accidents increased as streetlights went out. Businesses shut down. The Russian public had no idea this was a response to the missile strike. Russian military commanders scrambled to assess the impact. Automated systems prevented remote reactivation of the power grid. Engineers and control centers were unable to override the shutdown. The U.S. had executed the attack with precise timing, ensuring that Russian forces could not anticipate or mitigate its effects. Moscow's leadership quickly realized the magnitude of the setback. What was intended as a quick warning to the United States had turned into a humiliation at home. Politically, the Kremlin faced immediate pressure. Public frustration grew as news of the outages spread through social media and internal reporting networks. State-owned news outlets attempted to downplay the disruption. But videos and messages circulated widely, showing dark streets, halted trains, and chaos in hospitals. The leadership was forced into damage control. Internationally, Russian officials issued statements condemning the U.S., but no one could dispute the visible reality. Their strike had backfired, and critical civilian infrastructure was compromised. From the Pentagon, the response was controlled and measured. Officials released selective information to emphasize the defensive success of the U.S. base. Public messaging stressed that no American lives had been lost, the U.S. personnel had acted efficiently, and that the layered defense systems had performed flawlessly. The cyber-electronic counterstrike was never openly acknowledged, preserving the element of deterrence while minimizing escalation risks. NATO allies were briefed discreetly, reinforcing the message that any attack on U.S. or allied assets would meet rapid and precise retaliation. By dawn, the scale of the event became clear. Russia had lost power in 3 major cities for almost 12 hours. Public services were disrupted, industrial activities stalled, and daily life was severely affected. Military leaders understood that the strike had failed in its strategic aim to intimidate the U.S. and instead expose vulnerabilities. The situation forced the Kremlin to reconsider further aggressive actions, at least in the short term. In Europe, intelligence analysts reviewed the incident. They noted the unprecedented integration of missile defense, electronic warfare, and cyber operations. Lessons were drawn for NATO and U.S. forces alike. Modern conflict was no longer confined to the battlefield. It extended into digital infrastructure, civilian systems, and public perception. The events of that night became a textbook example of how miscalculation, even with powerful weapons, can result in unintended consequences. The outcome was clear. The U.S. base remained secure, its personnel unharmed, and Russia had experienced both physical and psychological setbacks. A bold missile strike had been neutralized within minutes. The sophisticated counterstrike had demonstrated the reach and precision of modern military capabilities. The world had witnessed a new form of conflict where one side's action triggered consequences beyond immediate expectations, altering the strategic landscape in hours rather than days. The events of that night highlighted a harsh truth. Modern warfare has changed. It is no longer only missiles, bombs, or troop movements. Technology now plays a decisive role. Cyber operations, electronic warfare, and missile defense systems shape the outcome before traditional weapons even reach their target. The United States demonstrated that careful planning, layered defense, and precision countermeasures can neutralize even a well-coordinated strike. Russia's attempt to assert power ended in a public and strategic setback, showing how vulnerability and miscalculation can quickly shift the balance. For civilians and soldiers alike, the lesson was clear. In a world of interconnected systems, a single action can ripple across entire nations. The U.S. base survived because of rigorous training, discipline, and preparation. Russia's cities fell into darkness because critical infrastructure was exposed. Both outcomes were determined not by the number of missiles, but by strategy, timing, and technology. This is the nature of modern conflict: silent, fast, and devastating in unexpected ways. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Russian commanders realized their offensive had failed within minutes, and their people experienced the consequences without warning. American personnel saw that rapid, precise defensive and retaliatory measures could turn an attack into an opportunity to demonstrate strength. In war, perception matters. Both sides understood that misjudging the other could have far-reaching effects, potentially escalating conflicts beyond the battlefield. Looking ahead, this incident is a reminder of fragility and caution. Nations with advanced technology and integrated defenses hold immense power, but even minor errors or miscalculations can trigger consequences that escalate quickly. The night Russia fired 18 missiles and the following blackout across 3 cities demonstrated that true strength lies in preparation, adaptability, and the ability to act decisively without immediate violence. In the end, the events serve as a warning and a lesson. The modern battlefield is as much digital and electronic as it is physical. One misstep can cascade into disaster. One well-planned response can avert catastrophe.